there are things we can't change as individuals. We can change what we eat because we do it all the time.
That's actually the reason you want to eat organic.
If you ate those 4 things every day, multiple times a day, if that's what you could only eat, you feel like it would set you up for a good amount of success.
I do.
Our health and longevity is highly determined by the foods we eat. And in this video, highly respected doctors break down the science of the superfoods you need to eat to reverse aging.
So our environment and our climate are being driven by the food we eat. And then of course there's the social issues. People don't understand that the quality of the food we eat, the processed food, the refined oils, the sugars, the chemicals, the additives affect behavior. We know, for example, Lewis, that in prisons, if you give people a healthy diet in prisons, they will reduce violent crime in the prison by 56%. If you add a vitamin supplement, it goes down by 80% because they're all nutritionally depleted. I mean, I had a patient, not a patient, he was a guy who was in jail, he was a murderer. He wrote me a handwritten letter years ago. He said, I followed your program in jail. I realized I was a murderer. My behavior was so violent my whole life. And when I changed my diet, I became a completely different person. I realized it was what I was eating. And now I'm so thankful for having my life back.
So you think our diet also determines our behavior?
Absolutely. There's clear evidence about that. I was just reading a study the other day that showed that people who eat a lot of carbohydrates and sugars and starches have much more violent behavior. We know that people who eat refined oils, which we now have 10% of these as our calories from soybean oil. It's in everything. It's not necessarily put in our food. It's in every packaged processed food. That has led to increase in homicides and violence and suicides around the world. And we've gotten higher on these refined omega-6s and low on omega-3s. So the evidence of how it affects behavior, mood, poverty, it keeps poor communities down. And then the food industry targets these communities disproportionately. So you have all these things happening at the same time. And then kids can't learn in school because they're eating Doritos and Coke and they can't actually focus and learn, and their behavior's all erratic and they're on these chemicals which alter their behavior. That's why 1 out of 6 kids has some neurodevelopmental problem, which is enormous, right? ADD now affects 1 out of 10 kids. I think 14% of kids have ADD, and about 1 in 10 kids are on medication.
Do you think ADD can be removed if we have a better diet, or is that something?
Absolutely,
like the brain or
no, absolutely no. It's not a brain problem. It's a body problem, and the body problem is caused by our diet and by environmental toxins. And I've had hundreds of ADD patients who've transformed their lives. I mean, I just, we were talking about the Broken Brain documentary series I did. I had a guy, I was in a New York Russian bathhouse the other day, and this guy comes in, I saw your series, I've been on ADD medication my whole life, and it helped me get off my medication. I mean, we see this. So you've got health, you've got the economy, you've got social justice and poverty issues, you've got climate, you've got environment, you've got education. It's all connected. And the issue is that most people don't connect the dots, number one, and most people don't realize that we're in this situation because of money in the food system that's driving our policies.
Right. You were mentioning how there's some press hits that you do. I won't mention who, but that would say you can't talk about certain things because of a sponsor that's funding the program.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So you can't talk negative about one brand or one product or
no.
Because of that, yeah.
That's right. I was told, well, you can't cover this subject because we get our funding from this sponsor. I can tell you a story from the past because the show's not on the air anymore. Sure. It was the Martha Stewart show. And I was on the show, and we were working with a producer, and we were talking about getting healthy and working out and detoxing, and Martha had her trainer there. And the producer says, well, we're going to have to do a bit as part of the segment on dairy and how dairy is such a great sports recovery drink.
No way.
Yes. And so I was like, I'm just sorry to tell you, but there's all this evidence that that's not true. So I downloaded all the scientific papers documenting the science behind the fact that dairy isn't a sports drink. And he's like, I know, but we kind of have to because this spot is sponsored by the Dairy Council.
Oh my gosh.
And then if you're ever on television, you know that the experts don't get notes. They don't get cue cards. They don't get teleprompters. They have to know their stuff. Well, this woman, who was the trainer, had all these cue cards that was being held up about dairy with all the bullet points of why dairy is such a great food and sports drink. It's insidious. So we think we're getting news. We're thinking getting authentic
from
information.
Experts too. From
experts,
doctors or specialists or experts, and we are influenced by these experts.
Huge. I mean, the evidence is so clear that the industry is heavily funding science. and they're funding corrupt science. So if you look at the data, for example, artificial sweeteners, 99% of the studies done by the food industry show that they are safe. 99% of the studies on artificial sweeteners done by independent scientists find that they're not safe. You know, if your industry funds a study, they're 8 to 50 times more likely to find a positive benefit for their product.
Right, of course.
Right? Whereas you look at, and then you look at the American Heart Association, the American Diabetic Association, the American Nutrition Dietetic Association. These are all funded by the food industry. I mean, if you look, it's Coca-Cola, it's Pepsi, it's Cargill. It's frightening to see how much money is. You have Trix cereal for kids as a heart-healthy cereal. Cocoa Puffs, Lucky Charms. I mean, Trix has 7 teaspoons of sugar, red dye, blue dye, yellow dye, you die. You know,
right.
Like it's all in there, and it's a heart-healthy food. Why? Because they get $300,000 for every time they put that check on a box.
No way.
Yes, way. And this is happening globally. Globally, I mean, there's a huge battle going on in Malaysia now, because Nestle has promoted this drink called Milo, which I never heard about, but it's a big drink in the developing world and in Asia and South America. And it's basically like Ovaltine. It's basically a malted beverage with sugar that has the same glycemic index as Coca-Cola. And they have athletes on there and sports characters and how it's a great drink for health. And they had this commercial, which I saw, which was a Filipino rock star singing this great, rap song about how everybody who's a kid has an energy gap. 4 out of 5 kids have this thing called an energy gap. I was at a medical conference.
What's an energy gap mean?
I was at a medical conference of 1,500 doctors. I said, has anybody here heard of an energy gap that 4 out of 5 kids have? No, they completely made this up. And they say these kids need Milo for the energy gap.
No way.
Yeah, and this guy who lives over in Malaysia called them out on this, and they came out with this huge propaganda campaign against him to discredit him and manipulating the facts and lying. And I was just watching this whole thing. It's unbelievable. So it's not an accident that we're in this situation.
Wow, the manipulation, yeah. And do you think that all inflammation, chronic pain, and disease can be eliminated from the foods we eat, or is caused by foods? Besides having like a car accident or something.
Yeah, I'm a functional medicine doctor. Run the Center for Functional Medicine at Cleveland Clinic, and so we look at the root causes of disease, and there are many. Right? There's environment, there's lifestyle, there's genetics. All affect these various systems in your body. Right? So we always say there's 5 causes of all disease, based on how they influence your genetics and combine with your lifestyle. Toxins, so environmental toxins, that's not your fault. That's just the fact that we put 80,000 chemicals in the environment without testing them. We have 3,000 food additives we eat every year as Americans, about 3 to 5 pounds of it, which is frightening. And there are heavy metals and pesticides everywhere. So we're exposed to a lot of toxins, and they make people sick. Infections, which we can get, whether it's viral infections and bacterial infections, Lyme disease, tick infections, allergens, which are increasingly common, or food sensitivities, things where your body's creating an immune response, whether it's gluten or dairy, those are big. And then poor diet and stress. All of those are contributing to disease. But by far, the biggest cause is food. Really? By far. And it affects, what's amazing is it's not just like a little bit. It's like people say, oh, my migraines or my arthritis or my irritable bowel. People don't connect the dots between how they feel and the food they're eating. And then when you switch, people have transformations very quickly.
Yeah. They notice it quickly.
Quickly, yeah.
And pain goes away, the weight goes off, all these things.
Yeah, I always say food is medicine. It's not just like a medicine. It works faster, better, and cheaper than almost any drug. We have people who are off insulin, who are type 2 diabetics, within a week.
Wow.
And get off all their medications. There was a huge study just published on a ketogenic diet intervention for type 2 diabetics. And I don't think ketogenic diets are right for everybody, but in an extreme situation where your metabolism is so broken, it can help reset things. Basically, reducing carbs to 30 grams a day, 70% fat, and help in the context of a healthy plant-rich diet. And they were able to get 100% of the people in a year over diabetics off of the main diabetes medication and 94% off insulin or dramatically lower, with an average weight loss of 30 pounds, about 12% of body weight. And this is unprecedented in the research. Because food, if you know how to apply it in the right way, at the right dose for the right person, it's the most powerful drug.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. You talked about in the book that you've been studying food for 35 years.
40 now.
40 years.
I was like, I did the math. It's 2018. I was started in 1978 in college. And I'm like that old.
Here's the thing. You've got 11 New York Times best-selling books. you've probably done how many books total?
14.
14 books, 11 New York Times, including this one, Food, What the Heck Should I Eat? And for 40 years, you've been studying food, and you say even the experts are confused by the science.
They are. They are.
So how come
How come I figured it out?
you know all the answers?
I don't think
after
about
40 years.
Yeah, I don't think I know all the answers, but I don't have a bone to pick.
Yeah, yeah.
In other words, I haven't spent my life dedicated to the low-fat diet. I haven't been dedicated my life to
Paleo
veganism. I mean, I'm looking at like what works. And the other thing I know is that I'm not an academic. Well, I do research, but that's not how I started. I'm a practicing doctor. So what's happened over the years is the latest thing comes in, I try it, see what happens to the patient. So seeing tens of thousands of patients, doing thousands and thousands of lab tests over the years, seeing what happens when people change their diet and how their biology responds, that's the best laboratory you'll ever see.
Right.
And I even noticed it myself. I was a vegetarian for 10 years, and I see pictures of myself when I was 28, and I am so scrawny, even though I ate really healthy. I ran 5 miles a day. I did yoga all the time. And I look at myself now doing far less exercise, and I'm far more muscular and have more muscle mass than I did when I was 28 because I learned how to change my diet. And we know that the right kind of high-fat diet and adequate protein actually increases muscle mass.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I literally just got off the phone with a friend who says, I went on a vegan diet, and 3 days into it, like, I can't lift anymore.
Yeah, but then you see some athletes that are all vegan who have like, gained muscle mass and gained strength, and you're like, well, what is the
Maybe
answer?
they're taking steroids. I don't know.
Who knows? Do you think living a vegetarian or vegan, fully vegan or vegetarian lifestyle, that it's hard to gain muscle mass?
I think it's hard. It's hard. It's not impossible. I mean, if you really work at it and really work out, and there are great vegan athletes out there, but there's never been a historically voluntary vegan society ever. And when you look at
Really?
yes, and
When you look blue zones or
no, they were never exclusively vegan,
Really?
right? They always had some animal food, right?
it.
The Kanawans,
fish or something.
yeah. And as hunter-gatherers, we ate 800 species of plants, so we had a very plant-rich diet. But we also included wild animals when we could catch them.
Right, exactly.
And so it's part of our evolutionary history, and our bodies are well adapted. And the protein in vegetables is different. So, for example, there's something called leucine, which is an amino acid that is the rate-limiting amino acid for muscle synthesis. In other words, in order to build muscle, you need this amino acid. And it's very low in plant proteins, very high in animal proteins.
Right.
So
why not just live a plant-based diet and then have the supplements?
you could.
And
You could. And I have patients who are vegans, monks. I mean, I'm not going to force people not to eat it, but it's much harder to do, and you have to know what you're doing. And I see people over time, initially, when they switch from a processed American diet to a whole foods vegan diet, they're going to get so much better.
Of
right?
course, yeah.
But the real issue is compared to what?
Right.
Right? What we really need to do is, and they've looked at over time, these big studies looking at animal and plant proteins and stuff over time, looking at what people do. And there's a vegan, vegetarian, omnivore study, which was 245,000 people. It was an observational study, but they didn't find any difference in outcomes. Another study, 42-country study, looking at food pattern consumption over long periods of time, showed actually the people who had animal fat and protein did far better than people who focused on cereal grains in their diet, less heart disease. Another study, the PURE study, just came out recently, 135,000 people. It was 5 continents, I think 18 countries, 10 years. And there was actually an improvement when people had more saturated fat and more good fats and less cereal grains and more animal protein.
More animal protein or
More
animal protein, yeah.
It was not a risk factor.
Right.
Now, these are difficult studies to interpret sometimes because they're observational, but you look at interventional studies where you intervene by giving people high-fat protein diets with lots of plant foods. People do better metabolically. So,
really?
yeah, and it's very hard to eat a low glycemic diet if you're a vegan. You can, but it's very hard. I have a friend who's a keto vegan, and she's a type 1 diabetic, and she's rocking it. But you have to know what you're doing.
You have to be so disciplined.
Yeah, super disciplined, super smart about it.
That's challenging.
Yeah. So I think and the data on meat, honestly, which I go into the book in great detail, is confusing for people because there's
It all depends on the factors of the meat.
Yeah,
where you get it, the environment it's in, how it's fed, how it's raised, the stress of it,
right? Exactly.
How it's processed, everything, right?
Totally right. So people go, we shouldn't be eating meat because it's bad for the animals, bad for the environment.
Right.
Yes, we should not be eating factory farm meat. This is really bad. It's bad for the animals, it's bad for the planet, it's bad for us because the quality of the meat is very poor. But let's say a wild elk or a grass-finished bison or even cow, very different. And it turns out that these animals actually have higher levels of omega-3 fats and higher levels of antioxidants and minerals and nutrients and beneficial fats, and actually are a great source of protein and don't have the harm that we think they do. When you look at the studies that showed there was harm, the reason they show that is because when you do a study, observational study, you give people a questionnaire every year. So you take 10,000 people, 100,000 people, and every year you give them a questionnaire. What'd you eat? What'd you eat last week? What'd you, if you can remember. And people answer according to what they think they should answer a lot of times, right? So if meat is bad, they're going to underestimate the amount of meat they're eating. So during the time of these studies, meat was considered bad. So people who ate meat didn't really care about their health. So they smoke, and the data show it. When you look at the factors of these people, their characteristics, which you can read in the studies, which I read, they were overweight, they smoked, they drank, they didn't eat fruits and vegetables, they didn't exercise, they didn't take vitamins, they ate more processed food, more sugar. Of course they were sicker.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what are the 3 basic food rules that you live by?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I always joke because I used to teach a lot of churches, and I go, ask yourself one question when you're shopping. Did God make this or did man make this, right? Did God make a Twinkie? No. Did God make an avocado? Yeah. Pretty simple rule.
Yeah.
And you can even take that to its logical extreme. Did God make a feedlot cow? No. Did God make a grass-fed cow? Yes, right?
Sure.
So you can kind of go down the line on all that. That's the first principle. The second principle is we should be eating mostly plant-based diet.
Yeah.
We call it plant-rich. I call it plant-rich.
About 80-20, right? So
Yeah, 80%, 70% of your foods on your plate should be lots of vegetables, nuts and seeds, fruit, whole foods. And the third principle is we need a lot of good fats. Avocados, olive oil. I think there's controversies about some things. Nuts and seeds are good, but then there's the whole saturated fat debate, which we can get into, where refined oils. But essentially, we need a lot of good fats, low starch and sugar, plant-rich diet, and stay away from processed food.
Yeah. Now, should that be true for everyone, or does it depend on your body type, your blood type, your genetics?
So I jokingly call this the pegan diet, right? Because I was sitting on a panel with friends of mine. One was paleo, one was vegan. They were fighting, and I'm like, listen, guys, you're paleo, you're vegan, I must be a pegan. And I was joking. And then it occurred to me that, there was more in common than there was different.
Yeah.
And then we could come up with these general nutritional principles that nobody's going to disagree with, right? Nobody thinks we should be eating a lot of starch and sugar. Everybody thinks we should be eating more plants. Everybody thinks if we eat animal protein that we should eat only sustainably raised or harvested or grass-finished protein. That we should eat fish, but it should only be fish that's low in mercury and toxins, that doesn't overfish the oceans, that if it's farm-raised, it should be sustainable. We should eat lots of good fats. I mean, there are a few outliers who still are holding on to low-fat dogma, but the train has left the station on that one.
Yeah.
And so there's these simple, that nobody thinks we should be consuming pesticides and herbicides and GMO, that we should be having 3 pounds of food additives per person every year. I mean, nobody thinks we should be eating those things. Like, nobody's going to say, okay, I think you should have more butylated hydroxytoluene with your salad. Right? Or red dye number 40, right?
Right.
These are things that are sort of inserted into our diet. So those are principles that I've sort of outlined, and it's adaptable. What about grains and beans? Well, some people do well on them, some people don't, and it really is individual. But I talk about if you are going to, here's the things to know about. Here's the grains to eat. Here's what you should or shouldn't do. Gluten, why is it a problem? Who is it a problem for? Is our current wheat the wheat we used to eat?
Right,
No, it's not. So that has an impact. What should we focus on? Could you have rye, which is has gluten in it, but it's probably, if you're not gluten sensitive, a much better food. So it goes through every single chapter. I go through meat, poultry, fish, eggs, vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds, beans, grains. And I talk about the controversies. What are the people fighting about? What does the science say? What do we know? What do we not know? There's still stuff we are learning, right? We're still discovering every day. So it's really kind of a foundational principle book. It's not extreme. It's sort of the middle of the road.
This is kind of the Bible for you then.
Kind of. It's
all the things you've learned.
Pretty much.
40 plus years now, 14 books.
Yes, it is. It's actually different than other books I've written because the other books are more topic specific. They're on the brain, or they're on metabolism,
Sugar,
or diabetes, or sugar. This is really, if you're an eater, and there's about 9 billion of us, it's probably something that'll help. And I also talk about how do you eat, not just for your own health, right? But what is the overall footprint of the food you eat? What's the health footprint, the economic footprint, the carbon footprint, the environmental footprint, the educational footprint, the national security footprint, and even poverty and social justice footprint of what you eat? Because there are things we can't change as individuals. We can't end nuclear war. We can't, single-handedly, end climate change. But we can change what we eat because we do it all the time.
Hey, it's Lewis here, and I would love to connect directly with you. Text me the word YouTube to my number 614-350-3960 to receive weekly inspirational messages from me. What are the top 3 to 5 key foods? I'm trying to simplify for myself. These foods that can really develop that. Yeah. What do you
different eat? So the thing is, different foods have different types, and different types feed different types of bacteria. So if you want, like for example, some people want to hear, oh, well, I can supplement with inulin. I can get an inulin powder. Inulin is a type of fermentable fiber. You can find it. You can find it in a variety of plants. I think onions, for example. But if you only eat inulin, then you're going to be basically feeding a certain types of bacteria that use inulin or that ferment.
So the variety is what you're looking for.
That helps with the diversity, because these bacteria are playing different roles. So
interesting.
There's.
I have been under the assumption that eating the same thing every day is good. It's like eating it clean, like a little bit of chicken, lots of veggies, and eating it pretty much every meal is the right way to go in terms of like my health, nutrients, in terms of like body composition, how I want to look and feel. Is that something that I should be going away from and diversifying what I eat every day? Or
Well, it sounds like you said vegetables. That's a lot in vegetable. There's a lot of types of vegetables, right? So it's kind of nice. Look, I'm just as guilty. Like for convenience, I'm busy. Like I know my husband gets tired of it, but I'm like the same. It's so much easier to have the same thing
every day.
Meals because I find the thing that's healthiest and easiest to make. And there's days where, let's say, I'm not working all day, then I can be more creative and I have more time. But generally speaking, it's easier to kind of stick to the same thing. But it's nice.
If you were going to, let's say you came up with a new company, a product that was a meal that you had to have the same meal every day for lunch and dinner and snack. And this would be the thing that you could sell to people. What would be included in that meal that you were like, you know what? If you don't have all the variety and time to make these foods all day, but if you could do this 3 times a day, you're setting yourself up for a really good immune system and good gut bacteria.
The same meal 3 times a day, or different meals?
Same meal.
So I would say basically omega. I would get salmon. I would get wild Alaskan salmon, and that's because salmon is one of the best sources of the marine omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA, which are extremely important for health, and particularly brain health, but even cardiovascular health. I mean, there's just been so much emerging evidence showing that the omega-3 fatty acids are really important for brain health and for cardiovascular health.
Piece of wild caught salmon.
That would be my protein. Mm-hmm. And it's also lowest in mercury. There's like 2 micrograms of mercury per 4 ounces cooked. So that's really low in mercury. I would definitely
cooked or raw fish.
Well, actually cooking it even lowers the mercury bioavailability even more. So definitely, and raw, you don't want to I think there's too much concern with parasites and all that. So I would say
cooking meat. Okay.
Number two, I would say I have to. And in fact, I always feel like I'm depriving myself, and I'm kind of quoting my mentor here a little bit, if I don't have dark leafy greens with a meal. Mm-hmm. Literally, like every meal, I like to have dark leafy greens. And
what are the top 2 or 3?
I would say kale greens? Because I would also like to have my sulforaphane. And sulforaphane, it plays an important role in so many. There's just so much evidence that sulforaphane, I think, may be important for longevity. So that would be my greens.
Kale.
And I'd like maybe sauteed. Sauteed would be good. Because it's just, you can't really eat raw kale unless you put it in a smoothie. Unless you put it in a smoothie.
Exactly.
Which I actually do. I drink my smoothie. I have blueberries. So maybe I would add the avocado. I'd have an avocado and some blueberries, a little cup of blueberries.
And that's it for your meal.
Yeah, that would be my
So you'd have wild Alaskan salmon, dark leafy greens, sauteed kale. You'd have blueberries and some avocado.
And an avocado.
if you ate those 4 things every day, multiple times a day, that if that's what you could only eat, you feel like it would set you up for good amount of success.
I
in your
do.
health.
I do.
Interesting.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of, so in kale, kale is probably one of the best sources of lutein and zeaxanthin, which are what are called carotenoids. And carotenoids you're probably familiar with, and people listening or watching this are probably familiar with beta carotene. That's like the probably most famous. That's like the poster child for carotenoids. Beta carotene is a carotenoid. It has antioxidant activity itself, but it also can be converted into vitamin A. Lutein and zeaxanthin are really interesting because they accumulate in 2 regions, in the rods and cones in the eye, and they've been shown to play an important role in preventing age-related macular degeneration. But they've also really been shown to play an important role in the brain. And there's this accumulating evidence that this stuff is accumulating in the brain. And it really hasn't been known why. And the reason I say that is because lutein and zeaxanthin, because of their molecular structure, they're really good at basically sequestering singlet oxygen. And that plays a role in like damaging the eyes, so like when you're out in the sun, exposed to the sun, and cataracts and things like that. So that plays a role, and you're basically eye aging, quote unquote, right? But in the brain, there's no light. So why is this stuff accumulating in the brain? And there's just been quite a few studies over the past 5 years or so, maybe last 7 years, correlating it with cognitive function and improved cognitive function and delayed brain aging. So and there's like studies, correlating plasma levels of lutein and zeaxanthin with, improved cognitive function. There's been randomized controlled trials supplementing with lutein and zeaxanthin, improving cognitive function in elderly adults. It's always nice to have a randomized controlled trial because that really helps establish causation. When you have, these studies looking at associations, at the end of the day, it's an association, and you never know, it could be some other factor, right, playing a role.
Sure.
But so the lutein and zeaxanthin in kale, you've got some fiber, a little bit of fermentable fiber. You've got the sulforaphane, which has been shown to increase. It's been shown in human studies to increase glutathione in plasma and also in the brain, which is amazing. Glutathione is one of the major antioxidant systems in the body, and particularly in the brain. And I know we were kind of chatting before we got started about your former life as what I didn't realize even existed was this, which arena football you called it. And it sounds like that TBI could be a big thing in arena football. A lot of
hits in the head, that's for sure.
Right. Well, glutathione is one of the major antioxidants in the brain and plays a very important role, particularly with any injury in the brain. So sulforaphane increases glutathione. It increases the enzymes that make glutathione and use it, and subsequently increases glutathione levels.
I saw maybe it was another doctor, I'm trying to figure out who said this, that there was some research actually potentially saying that kale was not good for you, that it had some negative side effects as well. I don't know if you've seen that research or if that's just something.
There's no research I've seen on that. I've heard it. But it's one of those things where people like to talk about potential anti-nutrients, and one of what they're calling an anti-nutrient is actually sulforaphane, because it can compete with iodine for transport into the thyroid. And but there's been studies, so for human studies where they've loaded up with sulforaphane, and there's been no effect on thyroid function. Those were short-term, like a week-long studies. There have been long-term studies on animals that actually have hypothyroidism. They were given sulforaphane, and believe it or not, actually they were given broccoli sprouts extract, which is one of the best.
I hear those are amazing for you.
Yes. So broccoli sprouts have like 100 times more sulforaphane than mature broccoli. Well, anyways,
so should we throw some broccoli sprouts on top of the kale or the avocado? The
broccoli sprouts actually would, if I could add more, I would absolutely put the broccoli sprouts in there. Yes.
Okay.
But my point was that the animals that had hypothyroidism, it didn't make their hypothyroidism any worse at all. In fact, it helped the antioxidant status of their thyroid and improved some functions.
Wow.
So I think that doesn't mean, people with hypothyroidism shouldn't be, weary or concerned about consuming too much sulforaphane, particularly if they're not getting iodine. Most people aren't iodine deficient. It's like in salt, most people are eating, foods that already have salt in them. Now, you know, iodine deficiency is not a big thing, particularly in the United States. But so I would say that those statements by some people that are kind of more into the camp of don't eat any plants,
Right.
aren't really
Not enough research on it. Yeah.
There's not. There may be, you might find one study with one case report with a female who had some crazy disease or something, and she was juicing like, you know, just ungodly amounts of kale every day, where it's like, I mean, okay, like maybe you can create a situation
Sure.
where, you know,
there's not enough research backing it though. Yeah.
But yeah, so
I'm curious about this. You have some great points here. I love your 5 foods that we should be eating for every meal. Now, I'm a 37-year-old man, but I've got I like to think curiosity and imagination of a 7-year-old. But I also have the palate of a 7-year-old, and I don't like blueberries. I don't like avocado. I'm the pickiest eater. I'm probably a pickier eater than your child. And I want to ask you, for the picky eaters of the world who don't eat berries and don't like avocado or aren't creative enough to go that far, and they're limited in their creative thinking in terms of foods, is it better to just have the supplementation, the vitamins and supplements that are the exact same nutrients, and just take the supplements and vitamins as opposed to the actual food itself? Or is the organic, fresh caught food always better than the fish oil or the blueberry vitamin? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think that there's huge differences when you're talking about eating a food versus taking a supplement. And I do think, for example, a multivitamin supplement is I take it every day, and I think it's great insurance to make sure, because, you know, there are 40 essential micronutrients, which are vitamins, minerals, and essential fatty acids and amino acids we have to get from our diet. And they're important for not only helping us, you know, not die, for example,
Right.
you know, scurvy, but also for long-term function, for the way we age, preventing insidious damage. But there's also a variety of these compounds we don't know about. You know, there's the fermentable fibers that are feeding the gut microbiome, and which are making all these chemicals like little drug factories in our gut that are regulating the immune system. We've got polyphenols, like blueberries have been shown, you know, in multiple clinical studies, it's been shown to increase blood flow to the brain and improve cognitive function and memory in both young adolescents and older adults. And this was thought to be due to the anthocyanins in blueberries. And, you know, so there's, you know, food has so many components, probably so many things we haven't even discovered yet. You know, so many compounds that we're just, you know, there's this new compound that was discovered in dark leafy greens called sulfaquinolone or something, which is now been shown to like have a specific purpose of feeding the gut microbiome, kind of like the fermentable fiber. So it's one of those things where you know, food has so much to it, and there's so many parts to the story. It's not just about getting the vitamin, right? It's not just about getting that one mineral. And I will say that when I was a postdoc with Dr. Bruce Ames at the Children's Hospital, Oakland Research Institute, there was a variety of clinical studies that I was a part of where my colleagues had designed this nutrient dense bar that had a variety of vitamins and minerals. It also had DHA, which is one of the marine omega-3 fatty acids found in fish. And it also had fiber, a fiber matrix. And there was a variety of studies that we were doing in obese and lean individuals. And
so it was like the ultimate food bar. It was like everything you need in this meal.
It was like it was like the micronutrient bar, where you were giving the micronutrients, but you were delivering them with a food matrix, like fiber, right?
Yes.
And so there's all these benefits that were found from this bar, that were particularly benefits found in people that were overweight or obese, that we didn't ask them to change their diet. They were eating their same diet, but you give them this bar on top of that, and you would have improvements. And inflammation, in like, you know, HDL cholesterol, which is a good type of cholesterol. So you'd have all these improvements. But if you took away the food matrix, and just had the bar without the fiber and just the micronutrients, some of those benefits would go away. But if you gave the fiber by itself, the benefits would go away. It was the whole package. It was everything together that was important. So, you know, with that said, I do think there is a place for supplementation, and particularly with fish oil. I think fish oil is one of those supplements that every day I take it, and I think that there's just mounting evidence that it's beneficial. I mean, high dose, it has to be in the right dose for some people. And it's been shown to really lower triglycerides, for example. But again, there's conflicting studies. And a lot of times when you look at these clinical trials, it all has to do with dose. It has to do with, were they taking a statin, for example, which can sort of mask some of the benefits. There's all sorts of things that are
complications.
It complicates everything. And then you get all this data and you're like, wait a minute, but yesterday it was not good for you. Today it is good
know,
for you.
Right? How are you supposed to know when there's so much information out there about medical news, about health news, nutrition news, supplement news? How do you know what to trust when there's just so much news out there about what's working and what's not working?
I mean, it's hard to know. It's hard. It's hard for me to kind of sort through it. Then you add this layer of genetics. That's also complicating, particularly with the randomized controlled trials. Like there's genes that people have where they actually need a higher dose of fish oil to have benefits, which is super interesting. There's also genes where people that get omega-3 from the plant source, because there's a plant form, alpha linoleic acid, ALA, that for chia seeds or flax seeds or walnuts, they don't convert that ALA into the EPA and DHA very well. And those EPA and DHA are ultimately what are regulating everything that's important for health. So again, you have the genetics that comes into, and this is also the case for studies on saturated fat, the genetics plays a role in that as well. So there's so many factors when designing a clinical trial. And I think the burden is on the researchers. The researchers have to come to a consensus,
right,
and realize.
But then a decade later, they may come to a new consensus with new research, where it's like we thought, I don't know, leafy greens were healthy, but now it's actually killing you, right? It's like not that it's going to happen, but I'm just saying it seems like over decades, what scientists and researchers think sometimes is accurate, we find later evidence that it may not be 100% true.
That is true. That is true. But I think when you have overwhelming evidence in multiple fields and multiple areas, so you have the epidemiological evidence, you have the associative studies, you have the randomized controlled trials where you start and you give someone something and then you measure an endpoint.
The double placebo testing, everything.
Right. And then you have the mechanistic studies where you start to look at how it's happening and you do these animal studies, that together combined, the whole comprehensive literature, I would say is what really strengthens.
Yeah. The matrix of studies.
When everything starts to come and point to that direction.
Whether you want to be an endurance athlete or have endurance in your life, or you want to put on mass, or you want to get lean, or whatever it may be,
right,
you have a specific lifestyle that I've always been excited about. When you came in here, you were talking about how I have the same stand-up desk as you, and I was like, yes, if I'm doing something that Mark is doing, I feel like I'm doing it right.
Right.
So I just want to dive into what this philosophy is and how you actually live.
Right. So my main goal is to live awesome. That's the tagline. That's the motto of our company. Primal Blueprint, live awesome. And what does that mean? It means extracting the greatest amount of pleasure, enjoyment, contentment, fulfillment that's possible out of every possible moment. Now, there are going to be bad times, of course, but to live in the moment, to appreciate the now, to appreciate the relationships, to have fun when you're working out, to enjoy every single bite of food you ever eat and not choke something down just because it's healthy. So it really revolves around orchestrating a life way of pleasure, of hedonistic experiences in the context of this modern world that we have here, understanding that we sit here with hunter-gatherer genes that have certain sort of proclivities and expectations of us that we can meet either through natural means or through artificial means. And sometimes there's not a right answer, but it's about choices. So how do I make choices that serve me in the short term, that give me pleasure, that don't harm me in the long term? So it's sort of an overview of what we're up against here. But as you drill down, as you boil it down and distill it down to what does it look like? It looks like, what are the types of foods that we choose to eat that turn on genes, that build muscle or burn fat? What are the types of, how much sun exposure do we get that allows us to make vitamin D and get tan, but not too much so we get burned? How much sleep do we get that and by the way, sleep is a very pleasurable thing if you are willing to acknowledge that.
Yes.
How much sleep do we get in a way that reinvigorates us and allows us to be creative on a daily basis and not brag about how well we do on so little sleep? So all these, how do we use our brain on a regular basis beyond just the rote stuff of checking the PDAs? But how do we do puzzles? Do we play games? Do we are we creative? Do we play musical instruments? Do we learn a language? How do we use our brain? All these things make the totality of the human experience, and I love to look at all the ways in which we can choose these behaviors that manifest themselves as pleasurable, enjoyable, providing contentment and fulfillment, and build us toward a better human being.
When did you start to, take this on? Because you were was a triathlete.
Yeah, well, I was a marathoner in the 70s.
Wow.
And actually the late 60s and early 70s.
Wow.
And from there went to triathlon. I was always trying to improve myself, optimize performance,
yes.
Using the tools of the day, which were pretty rudimentary. It's like, all right, run a lot of miles and eat lots of carbohydrates, and you'll be where you need to be. Well,
right.
That's what we knew. That's all we knew, and it wasn't exactly appropriate. So over the years, I got injured. I got sick from the overtraining, from the diet, which was very highly inflammatory and caused sorts
pastas and breads or what?
All that stuff that they said you had to eat.
I had so many pasta meals and pizza meals and lasagna meals the night before every game. And I remember just being so exhausted in every game. Yeah. High school, college, pro, it's just like exhaustion.
Right.
Yawning. I would yawn so much.
That's a classic symptom.
Why am I yawning?
Right. I'm supposed to be excited about the game and pumped up.
I wanted to take a nap.
I want to take a nap. Yeah, exactly. So we have these sort of old conventional wisdom technologies that we were using to improve performance theoretically,
yes.
And they weren't. So I basically ended my career early, prematurely. I was too injured to continue running. My health had suffered. I had arthritis and tendonitis and irritable bowel syndrome, and I got sick a lot, and I had heartburn and hemorrhoids, and I was like a real wreck. I mean, here's theoretically the picture of health because of the training I was doing, but I was falling apart on the inside. So I sort of rededicated my life to figuring out how I could be fit and strong and lean and happy and healthy at the same time without being overly, without too much struggle and sacrifice and suffering. Is there an easier way to be all those things I wanted to be that allowed me to have more pleasure in the moment and didn't sacrifice my long-term health? So that was the big shift in me, and it's been going on for 35 years, and it continues to go on. So as soon as I made that shift, I started doing the research. I wrote my first book in '82 on how to train for triathlons, and even then I was calling upon evolution as the main basis for how we train, and I was looking at the previous few years of triathletes, because in '82 there hadn't even been a decade of triathlon training.
Wow!
But I'd already recognized that we were doing it wrong. We were training too hard. We were
too many miles,
too much redlining the heart and the body, and there was a better way and an easier way to do it.
Right.
So I started recognizing that back in '82, and then it's even up until 3 years ago when I started researching the Primal Endurance book. I started thinking, well, all of the science continues to show us that the old choice was probably a wrong choice. That reliance on carbohydrates and that intent of managing our glycogen stores in our muscles was kind of the wrong approach. And maybe we ought to come at it from the exact opposite end of the spectrum, which is how do we become really good at burning fat? And in so doing, spare glycogen. And in so doing, unburden ourselves of having to take in so much carbohydrate in the form of pasta and breads and cereals and rice and crackers and cookies and all the other stuff.
Sure. And you're 62, right?
Yeah.
Right? And you're like leaner than anyone I know. So what's the most effective way to burn fat and still be strong?
Yeah, of course. As we said initially in the Primal Blueprint, and I've said it decades before I wrote the Primal Blueprint, 80% of your body composition is determined by how you eat. So there's a certain way in which you can eat where you can literally reprogram your genes to derive most of your energy from your stored body fat.
Really?
Yes. So as opposed to waking up, being hungry, having breakfast, being hungry at the 10:30 break, being hungry for lunch, having a snack in the afternoon, having a dinner, and having a snack before you go to bed, which is this sort of standard American approach. Like even the old bodybuilders would say, don't go more than 3 hours without eating or you will cannibalize your muscle tissue.
Right.
That was all based on an assumption that we had to burn carbohydrate and had to access glucose and glycogen for the muscles to be able to continue to work. It never contemplated that we are obligate fat burners. We are born with this amazing ability to extract calories from stored body fat. And the reason that we don't as we go through life is we present you're 2 years old, you're eating cookies and crackers and mushed peas and all sorts of all that stuff. And so your body learns to depend on glucose, on carbohydrates as a source of energy, and never really gets to the point where you force it to burn fat.
Wow.
So what we do is we shift the diet around. It's not painful. You get rid of the breads, the pastas, the cereals, the crackers, the cookies, the candies, the sweetened soft drinks. Well, it does sound kind of nice, doesn't it? But what you're left with is meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables, a little bit of fruit, some starchy tubers like sweet potatoes, things like that. Those are great tasting foods if you eat them right. And
they're real food.
And they're real food. And you can use butter and lard and you can eat bacon on this program. And what it does is it reduces the amount of simple sugars and carbohydrates you take in. And just sort of gently forces your body to upregulate all the enzyme systems that access stored body fat and burn it, and allow you to have more energy throughout the day without having to eat so often. So the first thing that happens is your appetite self-regulates. So now you get into this space where you become a good fat burner. You start to melt away.
You're not as hungry because
you're not as hungry because you're always carrying around a meal.
Yeah.
It's on your thighs, it's on your ass, it's on your belly, wherever it is. It's that's your body becomes so adept at accessing those stored calories. It says, I don't need to eat. I'm really not that hungry.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's so empowering for so many people.
But when I still love sugar,
Yep.
but I used to be really bad at sugar. I feel like I have much more under control. But I feel like when you're eating a lot of candy, sweets, and sugar, you're never satisfied. You just want to eat more and more and more.
But that's
until you're sick. And
No,
you're
exactly.
Like,
No, yeah.
I'm full because I'm sick now.
Yeah. I mean,
bad.
the stories of Lamar Odom eating 4 pounds of candy
Before games?
before games or whatever.
Crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, we're all hardwired.
But look where he's at now. It's like
We're all, but by the way, sugar is a very addictive substance.
it's so addictive.
So, we're all hardwired to seek out sweet things. That's part of that hunter-gatherer DNA that we all carry.
Really?
That hasn't changed in thousands of years.
So how do we shift our minds?
So the first way you do it is you go from the craving, which is what you're talking about. Like you crave sugar, so you eat sugar, and then that just promotes more craving, and it gets you into this sort of addictive cycle. You're actually producing sort of opiate-like substances that are occupying receptor sites that are giving you sort of a feel-good experience. So you got to kind of be willing to get rid of that. So you get rid of the candies, you get rid of the sweetened beverages, the soft drinks, and teas, and you get rid of the carbohydrates that not all carbs, but the breads that convert to glucose in the bloodstream so rapidly. So now you've lowered your glucose experience on a daily basis. So now the brain is starting to get, I don't need to really get that much glucose. The body is burning more fat. As a result of you being able to burn fat, you create these byproducts called ketones, which the brain loves to burn ketones and burns them preferentially. So you need less and less sugar to maintain clarity throughout the day. If you haven't become fat adapted and you're a sugar burner, which is what it's not a derogatory term, but we use the term to describe people who haven't become fat burners yet they're sugar burners. If you don't eat, it's true. If you don't eat for a couple of hours, your blood sugar dips because you haven't learned how to burn fat yet. You don't know how to access it. You can't take it out of storage and burn it. So now the blood sugar's low. The brain goes, I got to go get some more glucose. I got to get energy somewhere.
Some sugar or something.
Sugar or something.
Carbs.
So you have the bagel at 10:30 in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
Or you have the
tastes amazing.
Well,
for an hour, and then it's
no, exactly. But then you're hungry again, and
Yes.
that's this vicious cycle. So if
Yeah.
we can, take the steps. We say it takes 21 days. That's why I have a book called The 21-Day Total Body Transformation. 21 days of this cutting these sugars and starchy, not starchy, but simple carbohydrates out of your diet, and just focusing on healthy fats and lean proteins and vegetables.
right.
You your body gets the message and it says, I'm not going to be getting that much glucose. I'm going to learn how to burn fat, and I'm going to do it well, damn it. And then it takes the fat out of your body fat stores. So over time, you lose 1 pound, 2 pounds a week, and you trend toward your ideal body composition.
Wow.
So all of this is a 10-minute long-winded answer to your question of how, what does it take to burn fat. It doesn't take a lot of exercise. It mostly takes the dietary shift. Right. You got to do some exercise. You don't have to do anything, but you can choose to do some exercise.
It'll help accelerate
and it'll
it,
help accelerate it a little bit, but most of it happens as a result of the shifts you make in your diet. Absolutely.
It's all in the kitchen.
Yep.
So you can get abs in the kitchen and not do anything different working out.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the difference between, because it sounds like a little paleo-ish, what's the difference between primal, paleo, and like a bulletproof, which has kind of been picking up as well?
They're all sort of versions of a similar theme, which is to cut the sugars way down, cut the processed carbohydrates way down, get rid of the industrial seed oil, so that would be the soybean oil, the corn oil, the canola, which are causing inflammatory responses in a lot of people, and just kind of go to real food.
Yeah.
With the Primal Blueprint, we said at some point, dairy, if you like it, why not include it in your diet if you don't have an issue with it, right?
I love it.
So, but all these foods exist on a spectrum. So dairy, there's raw milk, which is good for you. There's A2 protein, which is a form of casein. We could have a whole discussion about the different types of cows and the different types of protein that they make. But on the far end of the spectrum, the good end, there's butter, there's cream, there's all these things. At the other end, at the bad end, there's 2% skim, homogenized, pasteurized, non-fat, whatever. Stay away from that stuff.
Yeah.
So all these foods sort of exist on a spectrum. So cheeses, for instance, part of the dairy family. I love cheese.
I love cheese.
So, we include it in our eating strategy because we say there's no real reason not to.
If it's the right cheese.
Paleo, yeah, exactly. Artisanal cheeses, and there's good and bad cheeses as well. But on the paleo program, or the paleo strategy, is pretty strict for a lot of people. So
No
they would
cheese,
say
right?
no dairy at all
Yeah.
of any kind. So no milk, no butter, no cream, no cheese. So that's there are little variations in this here.
But mostly whole foods.
Mostly whole foods is what we're all looking at. I mean, even if you look at a vegan experience these days or a vegetarian experience, it's really these dietary programs work largely as a result of what you eliminate, not what you're eating. Right. So if you eliminate the crap and you're left, even if you're only eating vegetables, as long as you're getting enough protein, you should be fine.
If I'm coming down with a scratchy throat or something, I'll take 150,000 international units of vitamin D3.
How many capsules is that?
3 days. Well, so you can get 5,000s, right? So that's 10 capsules 3 times a day for 3 days. So I'm basically taking 500,000 international units of vitamin D to ward off a virus.
Everyone always says you should take vitamin C when you start to feel like a scratchy
Yeah,
throat.
it really doesn't work. Vitamin D is probably one of the best antivirals that's ever been discovered.
So vitamin C really doesn't help that much? Or
It really doesn't help that much.
You
We can get into vitamin C, and I think
Wow.
everybody should take a timed-release vitamin C twice a day, and it's actually for a different purpose.
What's the purpose?
All right.
The quick version.
All right, quick version. So you and I are one of the few animals that don't manufacture our own vitamin C. Us, monkeys, and guinea pigs. And we have actually all the genes to manufacture vitamin C. There's actually 5 of them. The last gene is turned off. It's called a ghost gene. Why do we do that? Well, we manufacture vitamin C from sugar, from glucose. And it's actually very expensive to manufacture vitamin C. So the theory is, and I like the theory, is we grew up in Africa with lots of vitamin C containing plants in our diet. And so it was unnecessary for us to manufacture vitamin C, and the theory goes we'd have some extra glucose left over that we could store as fat to make it through the winter when times are rough, and we're the only fat-storing ape. So the problem is vitamin C is essential to repair collagen. And everybody, collagen, okay? The reason smokers get wrinkles is collagen is broken because you actually repair cracks in collagen with vitamin C. And smokers use up all their vitamin C with what's called oxidative stress. So they don't have any vitamin C. In fact, here's another controversial statement, if I've got a smoker with heart disease, I'm willing to trade him his smoking with him taking large amounts of vitamin C while I get the rest of his diet squared away, rather than tell him to stop smoking.
Wow.
Now, the reason I say that is, and I talk about this in the book, there's this fascinating island people called the Katavans in New Guinea who smoke like fiends. They eat 60% of their diet is taro root. The other part of their diet is coconut oil. And they live into their mid-90s with no medical care, but they've been studied extensively. There has never been a case of a heart attack, heart disease, or a stroke in these smokers. What they do is they eat a lot of vitamin C containing fruits and vegetables as part of their diet.
Olive oil as well?
They don't have any olive oil. They have coconut oil. That's their coconut. Yeah, they don't have any olives down there.
So you can do without olive oil and still live a long life?
Yeah.
But you think olive oil will...
Well, yeah, since olive oil is so readily available, you
might as well.
Might as well. Okay, anyhow, back to vitamin C.
Yep.
You have to have vitamin C to repair the cracks in blood vessels. People remember scurvy, where people would die, they bleed to death on long ocean voyages. Actually, 50% mortality on those old ocean voyages, just dying from scurvy. And the British Navy, the reason they're called limeys is because the surgeon in the British Navy realized that if he gave them limes to take on the voyage, that they wouldn't die of scurvy. And that's why the British Navy is still called limeys.
Wow.
So vitamin C repairs the cracks in collagen, and our blood vessels are flexing all the time. And so these cracks have to be repaired, and if they're not repaired, you basically bleed to death. We have a system of repairing those cracks, and it's called cholesterol, and cholesterol will patch those cracks.
Interesting.
So if you have plenty of vitamin C throughout the day, you'll be able to repair those cracks. And there's a wild study, I mean, head down a rabbit hole. You can genetically engineer rats to lack that final gene to make vitamin C. And they will live half as long as a normal rat. If you then put vitamin C in their water, they will live as long as a normal rat who can manufacture their vitamin C, but they're drinking the water throughout the day.
Yeah.
So vitamin C, unfortunately,
we have to manufacture.
We have to manufacture it, and we've got some interesting tricks to do that coming up.
Okay.
But in the meantime, the average person should take like 1,000 milligrams of timed release vitamin C twice a day.
Okay.
To cover their ass.
Wow. Okay. So the first thing I heard you say, this 3 minutes is turning into 20. It's okay. No worries. The first thing I heard is olive oil.
Oh, and olive oil is actually one of the tricks to activate the ghost gene. A polyphenol in olive oil.
Okay.
You will actually make vitamin C.
Okay, there you go. So there you go.
Another good reason.
So have olive oil. Yeah. Vitamin D, have lots of vitamin D. D3.
D3.
And then what's next to live a long life?
Next is you got to get some form of long-chain omega-3 fat, better known as fish oil. And vegans have no excuse anymore. There is algae-based DHA and EPA. But here's the deal. Your brain is about 70% fat. So if you want to call me a fathead, I will patch you.
Yeah.
And I can just see now the internet lighting up. GUNDRY is a fathead. So half of the fat in your brain is actually an omega-3 fat called DHA. So basically half of your brain is fish oil.
Wow.
And as I talk about in the longevity paradox, you look at people, what are called the omega-3 index, which basically looks at how much DHA you have in you over the past 2 months. People with the highest omega-3 index have the largest brains and the largest areas of memory, the hippocampus. People with the lowest levels of DHA have the most shrunken brains and the smallest memory areas, hippocampus. So Mom was right when she said fish is brain food. She didn't know why it was, but we now know it's DHA is really what makes your brain.
So sushi's good.
Sushi is actually not a good idea.
Oh, wow.
Most of the people I see with high mercury levels are sushi eaters or dentists. And particularly sashimi grade tuna.
God, it's so good,
just kind of want to stay away from it.
Oh, sugarfish is amazing, though.
Yeah, tono.
And it's got the grains, too.
Yeah, it's got the grains, so...
So no sushi.
Yeah, so
once in a while.
Yeah, once in a while.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. But so fish oil is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And what I try to get people to do, and again, I measure this every 3 months in all my patients, and we're talking, thousands and thousands of patients over the last 20 years. You want to get about 1,000 milligrams of DHA per day. Now, how do you do that? Well, you get fish oil. I mean, you can go to Costco. I don't care.
Right.
And you look on the back, and you find serving size, and make sure it says 1 serving size. They love to fool you. They may say 2 or 3, and then you look down below, and you see DHA, and you look to see how much DHA is in a capsule. And you add it up and say, oh, okay, there's 250 milligrams of DHA in this capsule, so I need to take 4.
Wow. 4 a day.
Yeah,
or 1,000 a day.
however.
1,000 a day. Yeah.
1,000 a day of DHA.
We got olive oil. We got vitamin D3. We have fish oils. What else do we need to live longer?
So you got to have polyphenols in your diet. So what the heck is a polyphenol? How do you remember polyphenol? Think about polywanaphenol.
Okay.
Phenols are plant compounds. Polyphenols are plant compounds that plants use primarily to protect themselves against stress and sunlight. Just interesting fact. We know that red wine is beneficial for you because of actually 2 polyphenols. The most famous is resveratrol. The other one is quercetin or quercetin. The higher the grapes are grown, the higher in altitude the grapes are grown, the more polyphenols they make.
Because they need more to protect themselves, right?
Exactly. It's basically suntan. They've actually protected themselves against sunburn.
Interesting.
Also, the more the plant is stressed, the more polyphenols it makes to protect itself.
Right.
Okay? So polyphenols are traditionally in dark-colored berries. So, for instance, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. Interesting fun fact, the leaves of these trees or vines have more polyphenols than the actual fruit does. So, for instance, black raspberry leaves have far more polyphenols than black raspberries. And I take black raspberry capsules, by the way, and it's in the book.
There you go.
So olives, for instance, are loaded with polyphenols, and olives that are stressed produce even better.
Wow.
Olive leaves have more polyphenols than olives. So olive leaf extract is an easy way of getting the huge amount of benefits without drinking a liter of olive oil.
So what about leafy greens? Do you want stressed out looking leafy greens, or do you want healthy, thriving looking?
Excellent question. It turns out that the reason organic vegetables in general are better for you, besides the fact that they haven't been sprayed with pesticides and herbicides and probably Roundup, and we can get into that, is the fact that these creatures, these plants, actually have to work harder, and they have to produce more polyphenols to protect themselves against insect predation. And so that's actually the reason you want to eat organic. So when you're going to the farmer's market and the poor little organic vegetables have got potholes of insects,
like they're dying,
and they don't look very good, you go, I want that guy.
Really?
That guy is struggling. He is going to just be so loaded with polyphenol.
Really?
And correlation with that is the more bitter, the better, because polyphenols in general are very bitter. For instance, when we were developing, my signature product, Vital Reds, it's pure polyphenols primarily, and they're bitter. So we did lots of taste testing to figure out how the heck we're going to mask these really bitter compounds. So more bitter, more better. In fact, as I talk about in the book, I had the pleasure of knowing Jack LaLanne, who you would know is really the godfather of fitness and nutrition in the United States. And I knew him in his later years. And Jack used to have a saying is that if it tastes good, spit it out.
Interesting.
Now, what he really meant by that is bitter things, nasty tasting things is actually what is going to give the bugs that are actually going to keep you alive what they want to eat. And don't, more bitter, more better. So, the more polyphenols, the more bitter greens I can get into you, the better.
Interesting. But you can get that through capsules and other things too. You don't.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. And in fact, that's one of the reasons I'm a nut about taking a bunch of supplements, because if you look at even really good organic eaters, most human beings only eat maybe 20 different plant species.
I probably eat like 3.
Yeah, most people do.
Like 5 maybe.
Yeah, and ketchup is not a vegetable. It's a tomato, and we can't do that. So our ancestors, and even looking at modern hunter-gatherers like the Hansa tribe, they eat 250 different plant species on a rotating basis. And you think about it, all those plants are grown organically. They're in 6 feet of loam soil. They got their cool microbiome. So they're just replete with all these nutrients and polyphenols. And so, if people think that they can actually do a great job eating healthy without supplementation, I got oceanfront property in Palm Springs. I'm happy to sell them.
Right, exactly.
There is no.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I want to get one more thing. I've heard that in order to extend your life, you need to, I can't remember the name, extend something at the end of your...
Telomeres.
Telomeres.
Yeah.
What is
or
that?
Telomeres.
Telomeres. So how do we, is that true? Do you have to extend this?
So that is one theory of longevity.
Yeah.
And it's a good theory. I like the theory. It's controversial. Vitamin D. Turns out that people with the highest levels of vitamin D have the longest telomeres.
There you go.
So why wouldn't you do that if you like that theory?
There you go.
So that's vitamin D is
vitamin D.
If anybody takes away, it's vitamin D.
So you've given 4 things so far. Let's give me one final thing that can extend our life and the quality of our life as well.
Great. So the last thing we want to do is we want to turn off as much as we can the sensor called mTOR. Originally called the mammalian target of rapamycin. It's subsequently been discovered in all organisms besides mammals. And so now it's called the mechanistic target of rapamycin. And so mTOR is an energy sensor, and it's in all of our cells. And basically, we come from a circadian rhythm system of plentiful food at one time of the year and very little food at another time of year.
Right, fruit sometimes, not the
exactly. And we use fruit to gain weight for the winter, and that's a whole nother subject. So mTOR senses energy availability, and it senses sugar molecules, and it also senses amino acids, protein. Now, it turns out that it's very sensitive to particular amino acids rather than all amino acids. The ones it's most sensitive to are amino acids contained in animal protein. And animals include fish. Animal protein includes eggs. It includes cheeses, and besides, meat. So beautiful work that's been done, a lot of it done by now my friend Walter Longo from USC, from the Longevity Center.
Is that the mimicking fasting
the
diet?
Fasting mimicking diet.
I've taken that a couple of times.
And he got a patent for Prolong.
Yeah, Prolong. Yeah.
Got a patent for it. So
Prolong.
So good. Prolong is a vegan, low amino acid diet that you do for 5 days.
Yeah, it's tough the first time.
It is.
For me, it was.
Now, in the book, I wrote about it in the Plant Paradox, actually, before he made Prolong, but I write about it again, and he's even given me a nice shout out on the back. The idea is you want to reduce mTOR as much as you can. And the more you suppress it, the longer you live. And here's the reason. If times are rough, and you sense that times are rough, your body, your immune system, actually goes around and looks at all the cells in your body and says, who's pulling their weight, who is really, contributing to this effort, and who's a slacker, who looks a little weird, who's not, not doing. And it actually instructs cells to commit suicide. And it's called autophagy. And it tells cells, sorry, you're not, you're out of here. You die. And so it gets the fittest of the fittest to survive.
It makes you stronger.
And you have to have these periods of time. You have to call the herd, as we say. So unless you do that, you have all of these cells that just kind of build up the debris. They're called senescent cells. Some people call them zombie cells. And it's the amount of these zombie cells that is actually going to make you deteriorate long before you should.
Get sick and everything else,
exactly. So you got to call the herd. So how you do that? 5 days in a row, once a month.
Once a month you do this?
Once a month, 5 days in a row. 5 days in a row. You follow a vegan diet of about 900 calories, and I got some great recipes. It's easy to do, and you do it 5 days in a row.
Yep.
It's as if you did calorie restriction every day, and what this does is not only call the herd, but it activates stem cells. Now, everybody says, oh, stem cells, it's the future. You've got oodles of stem cells in you already. Where do you think we get the stem cells? We, take a liposuction and suck out your fat, and then we spin it around, and we get your stem cells and inject you right back in. They're already there. You just have to call them into action.
So when someone does that, when they pull it out of you, they're essentially just killing off the dead cells and then putting the good ones back in.
No, they're actually, they're centrifuging out the stem cells. Stem cells are in fat. They're everywhere, actually. So but you got to activate the crazy thing. So you activate them by this modified fast, or you do intermittent fasting or time-restricted fasting. For instance, for the last 12 years, during the winter from January through June, Monday through Friday, I don't eat breakfast, I don't eat lunch, and I eat all my calories in a 2-hour window from 6 to 8 o'clock at night. So 22 out of 24 hours I'm fasting.
For how long?
For 6 months.
6 months you do that?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Now, why do I do that? Because way back when.
So you're just drinking olive oil and vitamin D all day?
No, during the night. During that
those
evening.
2 hours, just drinking it?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
But that's why you look so young.
I don't know.
That's why you look
Actually,
incredible.
if you look at pictures of me from 1995, which was about 25 years ago now, I look much older than I do now.
What should we be doing on a daily basis to
We've got to
help
focus
prevent
on a
this?
couple of things. One is that you have to know the truth, and not a truth that was paid for. Okay? Because those aren't truths. Not in chronic illness. The truths that have been paid for, so someone says, oh, here's the truth about this illness, or here's the truth about Lyme, or here's the truth about, no. Any truth that's been paid for that, that's not the ones you go with. Here's the truth. The truth is we have pathogens, we have toxic heavy metals, and we have to learn about the foods that feed these pathogens. And we have to learn how to remove these pathogens, kill them off. We have to learn how to remove toxic heavy metals out of our system, and we have to learn how to use foods as medicine to do it. But when everybody's playing guessing games because they're removing gluten, but they don't know why they should. They'll end up eating gluten again because they don't know why they should even really remove it anyway.
So what does Spirit of Compassion tell you are the 3 to 5 things that you should never eat? Or eat very limited amounts, like once a year?
The number one thing is eggs.
Don't eat eggs.
Don't eat eggs.
What?
Because the pathogens.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the viruses.
I love eggs.
Look, take shingles virus for one. Like, Spirit of Compassion has taught me about what that virus does, right? As far as what symptoms it creates. The shingles virus, and science research doesn't know this, it creates trigeminal neuralgia. That's what it creates. So the shingles, you don't even have to have a rash anywhere in your body, and you can have gum pain, jaw pain, neck pain, ear pain, head pain on the side of the head. You can have body pain. You can have the shingles can do all of this, right? It can make your gums feel like they're burning. It can make your face feel like it's on fire. It can cause all these different things. And the shingles virus feeds off of eggs. So when you're eating eggs every single day, you're eventually going to get the shingles virus if you have it, because everybody has the shingles virus in their system. Most everybody has one.
It's got to be heightened.
It's got to be heightened.
Elevated.
Maybe you had an emotional experience that knocked you down really good. Maybe your immune system has been down because you're zinc deficient. That's a huge thing. That's why I'm always recommending zinc. And then you're eating eggs all day. Not all day. Some people eat them all day. But you eat eggs every day, 3-4 times. That's the first food. Here's the thing.
So eliminate it. Never eat eggs, or have them once in a while.
There's a big part of big pharma that's really dark, that people are unaware of. Okay, that dark part of big pharma is 80, 90 years ago. They raised these viruses in labs using eggs as the virus's food. That's how it's done.
Okay.
So you got your fibromyalgia, you got your autoimmune diagnosis, you got your chronic fatigue syndrome, your multiple sclerosis, you got your Hashimoto's thyroiditis, your eczema, psoriasis, your rheumatoid arthritis, or whatever you got going on, your Lyme disease now, because that's an autoimmune now. You got all these things.
From eggs?
No, well, the bugs that create all these illnesses were raised in labs and somehow escaped those labs 80, 90, 60 years ago. And these bugs were raised on eggs. Eggs was the food. So they took a really great survival food, right? You like eggs.
Yeah, I love them.
You love them, right? So great survival food. They're easy. You make them in the morning. Yeah. You know, you just fry them up. Yeah, the protein, right? All of that. They took that food, they ruined it for us. So that's one example. Stay away from eggs.
All eggs, even if they're like your own chickens, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Look, if they're your own chickens, it's great. If they're organic, great. If they're free range, great. All of that's great. It's better, but it's still gonna feed. If you don't have a chronic symptom, you don't have a chronic illness, you feel great, nothing's going on at any level.
Eat the eggs.
Eat the eggs, and then if something comes up down the road, get rid of the eggs.
Okay, so that's number one. What's the next food we should never eat?
Dairy products.
All dairy.
Feeds viruses. It
Cheese.
feeds the bugs. Feeds the bugs.
Milk.
Goat's milk, sheep's milk, whatever you want. It feeds, kefir, it feeds the bugs.
Okay.
Yeah, milk, cheese, butter, the whole bit. So
butter?
People, yeah.
Come on, man.
So get the butter out of your coffee. It's the worst thing you could do if you're sick.
Even ghee?
Yeah.
Ghee's bad.
Yeah, it's not going to be good. The thing is,
again, if you're not feeling any symptoms,
none of this stuff is really bad if you don't have any of the
symptoms.
Okay. If you're not dealing with all the pathogens everybody has. If you're not dealing with the streptococcus and the different groups of strep that everybody has in their system, and if you're not dealing with the different Epstein-Barrs and all of that. If you're not dealing with anything, then you could probably get away with this stuff and you can eat it. Is it bad for you in other ways? Some of it could be, maybe, whatever. And of course, you could always find a paid-for study that says eggs are good, or this is good, or that's,
or tons of milk.
Of course. You can always find a paid-for study. But that paid-for study and everything else around it all, nobody knows why women and men and children are suffering like they are. With the heart arrhythmias that are mysterious, and the heart palps, and all the different body pain and the migraines and the tingles and numbness and the tics and the spasms. Nobody knows how any of that, and the fatigue, nobody knows what's going on or causing all of that. So then, hey, wait a minute, but there was a paid-for study saying that eggs are really good for me. And my doctor recommended them because it's a great protein source. Let me just eat them and then try to do my keto diet with eggs. Let me try to do this diet, maybe stay away from gluten. But in the end, and I have total respect for everybody that's trying to experiment. And you'll see it on YouTube too. You'll see, like a few years ago, people being like, okay, I'm doing this, and then all of a sudden they're getting sick. Like, it's showcasing now, because we have a documented record we never had before with people with symptoms. It's showcasing things now, like on social media. We're seeing it now where someone's like, okay, I'm loving my eggs, I'm doing it for like, a year or whatever, and then a year later, they're getting eczema and psoriasis, and they don't know why. It's like things we're seeing it now when we never even could see it before, because social media is showcasing this whole documentation of everything in people's lives.
Okay, so we got no eggs, no dairy. What else?
Okay, these are the basics. These are the basics. Those are the two big ones.
If you eliminate that, you should be
And gluten's your third basic. That's your third. Those three.
So anything that tastes good, eliminate.
Whether you want to stay animal protein, whether you want to be vegan and stay vegan and plant-based, that's what you get rid of. Whether you're,
gluten, dairy, eggs.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're saying meat is okay, or plant-based is okay, or what's the ideal?
Well, meat. Here's
what
the
does Spirit of Compassion tell you that you should be eating?
I'm a big supporter of plant-based. Huge supporter. Okay.
Is Spirit of Compassion a big supporter?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Plant-based. Total big supporter. Okay. But I'm not anti the animal product crowd and what they're doing, because I'm not against meat either. And I think that gets the plant-based people mad at me that love me. They're like, wait a minute, he's not against him. How come he's not against him? How come he's not fighting for staying away from animal products and stuff? Because the animal products, like say meat, right, doesn't feed a pathogen. So it doesn't feed a pathogen. So I can't take it personally. Personally, I like plant-based.
Yeah.
Better, like on a personal level, but I have nothing against animal protein. Here's how it works. Like years ago when I used to do all the readings, I worked on one-on-one individuals, 250,000 individuals for the last 35 years.
So people would come into your office, you would do a reading with them.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if I like an animal product or not. It's not about what I like. It's about what is going on inside the body. So Spirit of Compassion will be like, this person has this, so they need to get rid of this food. So this person has, for example, an HHV6, cytomegalovirus, or Epstein-Barr, or they got a streptococcus, and everybody's walking around with these bugs, by the way. And they are. It's unbelievable. And so Spirit will say, you have to remove this food. So it's not a personal thing where I have to all of a sudden pick a side.
It's just black and white.
I get it. Everybody's trying to get on somebody's team with a diet or a program that's working for them, and then they stay with it and they try it, and then they go against the other side, right? You see it. Everybody's trying to get on somebody's team. That's human nature. That's the way we are. But I can't do that. I can't get on just the plant-based team, because I know through Spirit of Compassion that meat won't feed a virus.
There you go.
Dairy will. So then I'm like, no, both sides. Well, of course, the vegans aren't going to do dairy, but both sides.
They might do gluten,
But they may want to do dairy someday. They may want. A lot of vegans break and they go on to cheese or they go on to something. It's but if they know, no, wait a minute, this feeds this. The same thing with people that are eating animal protein. Stay away from dairy, so you're not feeding your pathogens to keep your Hashimoto's going, and to keep your fibromyalgia going, and your chronic fatigue syndrome going. So it's really important. I can't take a belief system. Like, I can't side up with a belief system.
Yeah. Okay. So those are the three main things. Is there anything else that we should be?
And then it's about taking out the toxic heavy metals, taking out the mercury, aluminum, the copper. Yeah.
Is that fish or is that?
If you don't have a lot of metals, you could probably eat fish.
Right.
You could have sardines, you could have trout, you could have salmon, you could have fish. If you're not dealing with a lot of metals. But if you got symptoms and you're dealing with issues and you're suffering and you're struggling, keep
more toxic metals in the fish.
Keep the extra metals out. Exactly. Keep them out. It's important. But getting the metals out of the body, bringing in if I can give tips to anybody out there, watching this podcast, it's get on the celery juice.
And why does celery juice have more benefits than water? Why does it help you cleanse the toxins, I guess?
It's herbal medicine. It's an herb. It was missed by everybody. Everybody thought it was just good for crudité, right? Or maybe throw a celery stick in somebody's smoothie or juice or something if it's kicking around. And Spirit of Compassion has taught me, going all the way since I was a child, that it's a miracle medicine.
Really?
Yeah, because it's an herbal medicine. It has power that people don't know about, just like so many other foods have power. But this one particularly, it has a sodium cluster salt. So something called sodium cluster salts, that's a pathogen killer. That's different than salt. It's different than sea salt or anything else. But it's a pathogen destroyer. It starts to break down the membrane that's around the pathogen. The virus has a sheath around it. It's cell sheath. And the sodium cluster salts in celery juice start to wear it down and break it down. And that's just one thing. I mean, celery juice binds onto byproduct that people have in their body. So toxins from pathogens, it binds onto it and pulls it out of their body.
Wow.
So that's just a couple of things.
Pulls
I
it
mean, I
out
could
and
go on.
you-
I wrote a book all about it. I mean,
Right.
those are just a couple of things.
Okay, so celery juice being one, what else should we be adding?
Get the heavy metal detox, the medical medium heavy metal detox smoothie in you, so you can remove the metals. So if you're somebody with eczema or psoriasis or lichen sclerosis, you're somebody or any kind of like skin problem of any kind, rosacea, vitiligo, get
Acne.
the metals out. Yeah,
Acne too, or no?
Yeah, sure, definitely. It even helps with that because streptococcus causes severe cystic acne, and that's what's behind that. And it does feed on metals too a little bit, but. What happens is that you want to get the metals out. Celery juice helps to flush the metals out once you've loosened them up with the heavy metal detox smoothie. So you want the medical medium heavy metal detox smoothie to pull that stuff out. That's one example. And these are just a couple of things you can do. Get rid of your gluten, get rid of your eggs, get rid of your dairy, whatever side of the aisle you're on, whatever belief system
Meat, plant-based, it's okay.
You're in.
Just get rid of those things and add celery juice
And then-
in the smoothie.
Yeah.
And you should be healing yourself a lot
You're
better.
moving forward.
Gotcha.
And then, of course, there's a bunch of other stuff you can do, and there's tons of information that I talk about all the time, adding to all of this, but those are some starting points if someone's just going to listen to this and then just be like, well, what do
Get started here, yeah.
Yeah.
You want to learn about the key foods you need to eat to master your health, make sure to watch this video right here.
Humans who eat 2 cups of mushrooms per week do not get Alzheimer's disease. And it's because
2 cups of any type of mushroom?
any type you want.
Just go to the grocery store, get some mushrooms.
Turn